Everyone, and welcome to the October 11th, 2022 special meeting of the Glendale City Council. Mayor Kasakian is not available. He is out on city business, and being as I am the mayor pro tem, I will be conducting this meeting this afternoon. May we have roll call?
Yes. Council members Asatrian?
Here.
Brotman?
Here.
Devine?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian?
Here.
Mayor Kasakian?
May we have your report?
Yes. The agenda for Tuesday, October 11, 2022 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Thursday, October 6, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And what is the next item?
The next item is item 1, Glendale Water and Power regarding renewal agreement for the acquisition of capacity and renewable transmission service contract with Southern California Public Power Authority for Southern Transmission System. A, motion authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute the renewal agreement for the acquisition of capacity in STS and any ancillary documents, including certificates, letters, and notices to administer and effectuate the implementation of the agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian.
I'm sorry, there's B.
Oh, there's part B, okay.
Motion authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute the renewal transmission service contract for STS and any ancillary documents, including certificates, letters, and notices to administer and effectuate the implementation of the contract.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, Member City Council. I'm just going to go directly to Chi Valdez, our Integrated Resource Planning Administrator, to present this item for your consideration.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. My name is Chi Valdez. I'm the Integrated Resource Planning Administrator for Glendale Water and Power. And I'm here to discuss with you two agreements with the Southern California Public Power Authority, or SCAPA, related to the Southern Transmission System agreement. So these are a renewal agreement for the acquisition of capacity and renewal transmission service contract, collectively referred to as the STS renewal agreements. So basically, these documents assign GWP's rights to SCAPA, who in turn will allow us to process and issue bonds for the renewal project. So before I go into the details of the agreement, I just want to go over this particular section of our transmission map. So the STS here, or the Southern Transmission System, is a 2,400 megawatt high voltage transmission line from IPP near Delta, Utah to Adelanto, California. It is owned by Intermountain Power Agency, or IPA. So the purpose of this STS line is to transmit to the California participants their entitlement of the IPP project. So through its participation in the IPP Repower, Glendale's share of the STS line was increased from 2.274%, or approximately 55 megawatts, to 5.278%, or approximately 127 megawatts by 2077. So that 72 megawatt increase is also reflected on the Adelanto to Airway under the IPP Transmission Service Agreement with LADWP. So the STS line here is a critical transmission asset for all of us. It's for delivering the IPP power and for the delivery of other renewable energy from this region, such as geothermal projects, solar and storage, and wind projects. The access to this line is critical to achieving the SB 100 RPS requirements to serve 60% of retail load with renewable energy by 2030, as well as City of Glendale's goal to achieve 100% clean by 2035, as set forth in the resolution adopted on August 16 of 2022. So in 2015, Glendale actually entered into a renewal power sales contract with Intermountain Power Agency, renewing our participation in the Intermountain Power Project through June 15 of 2077. Although the IPA financed the construction and majority of the IPP project, the California purchasers of the IPP, including Glendale, financed the original construction of the STS through SCAPA. So in the 80s, City of Glendale, together with other California purchasers, entered into an agreement for the acquisition of capacity and transmission service contract with SCAPA. This is to assign its capacity rights to SCAPA and allow for the issuance of a more economically favorable bonds and other debt obligations by SCAPA for the construction of the STS. These STS original agreements are effective through June 15 of 2027. So similar to the STS original agreements, the remaining California purchasers, that is the cities of Glendale, Burbank, and LA, proposes to finance the STS renewal project through SCAPA because they will be able to issue tax-exempt municipal bonds and incur other evidences of indebtedness at lower yields than issuing bonds through IPA. And in order to undertake the proposed financing of the STS renewal project, the City of Glendale would need to approve the execution of these two agreements. This is to extend the termination of the existing agreement from 2027 through 2077, and also to authorize the issuance of new bonds and other debt obligations by SCAPA for the STS renewal project. So the City of Burbank has approved this financing methodology. LA is planning to seek approval at their upcoming LA meeting, board meeting. So for fiscal impact, sorry. So the percentage breakdown of the SCAPA rights to capacity in the STS is as follows. So Glendale here is the green piece. So that's about 5.278%, Burbank at 4.2%, and the majority at 90.5% is LA's share. Sorry. So as I've said, there's no physical impact associated with this report at this time. The total construction cost for the renewal of the STS is currently estimated at approximately $1.2 billion. Sorry, thank you. The total cost of the bonds and other debt obligations to be issued to finance the payments in aid of construction to IPA is estimated to be approximately $2.3 billion. So that includes principal interest over a 30-year term, including other miscellaneous financing related fees. The estimated all-in true interest cost is approximately 4.02%. Excuse me 1 second. Yeah, that 4.02% is based on the current market interest rates. Sorry, for tax-exempt bonds issued by SCAPA. So Glendale's share of that is $121 million over the life of the project, and the average debt service obligation cost is approximately, sorry, $4.4 million per year. So as a majority participant of the operating agent and the operating agent of the STS renewal project, LA's FSO, or the Financial Service Organization, conducted a research and financial analysis, and based on their analysis, they have determined that issuing the bond through SCAPA would result in a savings of approximately $23 million over the life of the project. Sorry. The projected savings are based on the higher credit ratings anticipated for the SCAPA STS renewal project issuance versus IPA. So today, by approving this SCAPA, by approving these two agreements, SCAPA will be able to issue tax-exempt municipal bonds and incur other evidences of indebtedness at lower yields than issuing bonds through SCAPA for financing and capital improvements of the SDS. If we don't approve this one, IPA can issue the bonds to finance the capital improvements instead of SCAPA, such as issuing bonds. However, it will be at a higher cost for the ratepayers of Glendale. And that concludes my presentation, if you have any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any callers? Ma'am, if you want to speak, you have to fill out a card. You knew.
We don't have callers.
Recognize you, Mrs. Valentine, even with the mask on. Aside from this card coming in, are there any callers? Okay. First speaker is Victoria Valentine for 3 minutes.
Yeah, hi, good evening. My computer was hacked, I think, by you know whom, across the ocean, because I thought this was about Shoal Canyon. Anyway, I'm glad I'm here. I'm among millionaires. You're discussing millions of dollars of figures. Well, it's $1 billion city budget. So I'm in the right place here. But I wanted to say to Ms. Paula Devine, I enjoy your makeup, and I'm gonna start putting makeup on. I've neglected myself over pandemic, so. And Mr. Najarian, of course, he's on that Thomas train, riding the city. So, very nice to see everybody. And I see new stairs, I haven't been here. The stairs are huge for a small building like that, which is very good. Yes, okay, thank you. And I don't
You're
even
welcome.
understand what this transmission is. Is that the power, the wires?
Mr.
Why
Young
don't
can
you
answer
use
all your
English?
questions.
Why don't you use an English language then? Transmission of what? I thought it's a by car transmission. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, nice to see you back.
Thank you, Mrs.
Bye.
Valentine. Always nice to
And
hear you and see you.
Mr. Michael J. Garcia. I can never get. Oh, hi.
Oh, Mrs. Valentine,
She's having a good time. She's back in the
Mrs.
mix.
just wait if you can,
Yeah.
for your pleasantries. Council members, any questions or comments at this point? Mr. Brotman?
Yeah, I have a question or two. Could you go back to that slide that has the image of the transmission lines at the top? All the way at the beginning. Yeah, that one. A nice, pretty image. So just a couple things, which I think I know the answers to, but just to clarify. So the IPP repowering, now that is supposed to come online in 2027. Is that right?
The IPP repower is going to come online
In 2025?
That is correct.
I see. Is that, but we don't get that additional transmission till 2027, so how does that work?
So for that one, I believe that we would still use the existing transmission line for us, for Glendale, we will have that 55 megawatts. And not until 2027 that we would have the full additional 72.
Okay, so that increased share that we get, we don't really have access to that.
Thank you.
We don't have access to that till 2027.
Until 2027.
Okay. And then, I mean, I've read that the plans are that IPP is, I mean, they're going from coal to gas, right? It's coal today, they're going to gas, but that 30% will be hydrogen. Is that still the plan? I mean, in 2025, they're going to be producing 30% of that energy using hydrogen?
That is correct. So that is still the plan, and we're working towards that plan. There are a lot of hurdles, but we are getting, that is still the plan.
Okay, that's what they're doing. I mean, we're not really directly part of that, right? except that we are I guess we're a
purchaser.
shareholder, we're a
Yes, that is
purchaser.
correct.
Something.
Yes.
Okay, but that's the plan. And then one other thing on this is, so we get the Hoover Dam, we get a lot of power from that. Where is that coming into this picture?
There's another line here. This is just the southern transmission system. So we do have access to different transmission system from LADWP that brings us power from Meade. That's, like where the Hoover is connected to. So that's from Meade to Adelanto to Airway.
Okay, but don't we also call that the Southern Transmission System?
Unfortunately, no. So the Southern Transmissions System is part of the IPP project, and IPP is basically the IPP generation, the STS, and the NTS portion
Okay.
of the Southwest.
Maybe
AC
for
side.
shorthand, we sometimes just talk about Southern Transmission System.
Yes, the
Is
Southwest.
the whole thing, is
that's
that right?
correct.
'Cause-
Yeah, that's
I think it's
correct.
a Pacific Intertie. Is that the name that we use?
Well, no, that's
It's
the
on the other
other
side.
one. That's the other one.
NTS,
Yeah, I'm sure you'll
Northern,
clear it up.
Northern.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. It's not usually that I'm here at 3 o'clock, but good afternoon. It's the Southwest AC that I think you're referring to. The Southwest AC has the AC lines that go from Meade, and it also interconnects the Intermountain line. And the Pacific Northwest, or the Pacific DC line, comes from Oregon and Washington.
So the generic term we use is the Southwest AC, is that? Because we
that's-
usually talk about it as one thing, all that Southwest stuff, right?
So the Southwest AC, when I generically talk about it, I really refer to from Adelanto to Airway. And from Adelanto to Airway, then there's two lines that connect at that hub.
Two lines coming into Adelanto. Is
That's-
that? I know
Loosely speaking, that's true.
Okay.
So the Southwest AC and the STS connect at Adelanto, and then one line, or essentially one line, comes into Airway, or
Okay.
one of our contracts.
And then the other question I have is just this whole structure now where we're assigning rights to SCAPA and then they're issuing bonds. Is this new? Have we ever done it this way before?
Yeah, so this has been the setup since the 80s. So they were given the consideration to do the financing of the construction and like capital improvements on this project. Although IPA is the owner of the STS line, we, the purchasers, are actually paying for the construction and the capital improvement on this line. And for us to be able to do that one, we did it through SCAPA, all the purchasers. Like I said, since 1983, that's
Okay.
what we've been doing. So with this one, we're just renewing it and extending it
Okay.
through 2077 because there's a big capital improvement that we need to finance for this project.
Right, okay, so it's not a new structure. There's not some new any legal issues, risk issues, or anything like that. We've done this, we've been doing this.
That is correct. So from
Okay.
from 83 to 2027, so we're extending that through 2077.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Um,
Ms.
just-
Devine?
yeah, thank you. Just very briefly, I can see the importance of this renewal agreement, so I'm ready to move the item 1 and 2.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Any other comments by any other council member? So we have a motion and a second. Let's take roll call, please.
Council members Asatryan,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Kasakian.
Let's move to item 2, please.
Item 2, Public Works regarding Slow Streets Program update. A motion authorizing the use of styrene sign material for new slow street sign installations within the roadway, including back-to-back sign mountings and modified placement of slow street signs to allow for truck turns for the Glendale Slow Streets Program.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian.
This Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, Member City Council, as you know, we started the Slow Street program during the pandemic, where there are people who wanted to use streets for walking and maintaining their distance, the required distance. Pastor Casanova, our principal traffic engineer, is going to present this item to you that includes an update on that program and seeking to move forward with the next phase of the installation of these signs, as well as some options for enhancements, if that would be the council's desire, to add those enhancements to the recommendation by staff. Mr. Casanova.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, members of the City Council, today's presentation is regarding the City of Glendale Permanent Slow Streets Program. This is a brief timeline of the Permanent Slow Streets Program implementation phase. Earlier this year, in April of 2022, a contract was executed with a specialized installation and maintenance for installation and maintenance of a permanent slow streets program. Shortly thereafter, materials were ordered, and subsequently, by June 30th of 2022, phase one of the permanent installations was completed. Immediately upon completion, staff initiated the assessment of the installations, documented some lessons learned of the phase one, and is here today to provide some recommendations, which will include a stronger, sturdier sign material, as well as some enhancements. So these are some lessons learned from the phase one deployment. We found that the sign installations in the center of the roadway were getting damaged by vehicles, predominantly the turning vehicles. We also found that the corrugated plastic material that was used on the installations was too soft. Upon impact, the signs were getting either too damaged or even dislodged from the tough post that held the signs. We did find that the tough posts themselves, or the candlestick part of it, if you want to call it, did sustain the vehicle impacts, but again, without the sign mounted on it, they were less visible and they kept on being hit as well. Staff also noticed that the proximity to nearby driveways is an important factor to consider to maintain access in and out of and minimize conflicts. And one of the most predominant conflicts that were found were the conflicts with the turning maneuvers for the larger vehicles, such as fire trucks, city garbage trucks, as well as the delivery trucks like UPS and FedEx. Lastly, we noted that on streets that were less than 36 feet wide that have parking on both sides of the street, there simply is not enough room to put the slow street sign in the middle and still allow for a vehicle travelway through without hitting the signs. So on the screen is a graphical depiction of some of the lessons learned. Again, one of the most predominant one was the turning maneuvers for the larger vehicles. So on the screen, we see a turning template of what would be a typical city garbage truck, and that's shown in red. Another element shown in red is we see the conflict point. We see kind of like a star-shaped figure, which was where the slow street signs were implemented for phase one, right at the stop bar. So we can see as the trucks make the turn, they essentially hit and run over the sign. Indicated in yellow would be the potential location to set that slow street sign assembly back, still in the center of the roadway, but push it back far enough so that it's out of harm's way, which is why we see the happy face as it's out of harm's way. So in consideration of the lessons learned and the issues that were identified, staff has developed several recommended modifications. Some of these modifications are within the current budget appropriation, and some require new additional budget appropriations. The modifications that can be implemented immediately within the current budget appropriation include upgrading the sign material to a thicker, stronger styrene plastic material, as well as installing the signs double-sided, or rather double-posted, on each side of the tough post and still along the center of the roadway. This stronger material would also allow us to install the signs 6 inches taller or higher up on the tough post, so it's a little taller than the tough post because of that stronger material. And also, in terms of the location of the sign assemblies, staff is recommending to set back those sign assemblies further back in the street, as we saw from the turning template, so that the signs are physically out of harm's way of the turning maneuvers for the larger trucks, emergency trucks, and delivery trucks. Also, in locating the specific locations, staff will be mindful of any nearby driveways and try to maintain a minimum distance from the driveways. And lastly is to recommend that these sign assemblies that are mounted in the center of the roadway only be mounted on streets or implemented on streets that are 36 feet or wider. The second option or additional option would require now new budget appropriation, and there are two enhancements that are recommended. One involves the installation of K71 flexible traffic posts, and the second option would be to implement raised concrete medians along the middle of the roadway to complement the slow street sign assemblies. There are some rough order of magnitude costs indicated there on the right for phase 1 and phase 2. In this slide, we'll go over this styrene material. Well, what is this? The styrene is actually, the full term is polystyrene, and it's a thick polystyrene plastic. Some of the characteristics are listed there in bullet, and highlighted in a rectangular blue box are really the predominant ones that caught the attention of staff, as well as why the contractor recommended these, is that this material maintains its strength in high impact applications, as well as it is made out of a recyclable material. On the left side, you see two images. On the lower left, that would be a sign that we may have seen out in some locations. They're sometimes implemented together with mid-block crosswalks and uncontrolled crosswalks that say state law yield to pedestrians, and those are made out of this styrene material. On the upper left is the double posted option that staff is recommending to, again, put these signs now back to back on the tough post so that they'll be visible to traffic coming from both directions.
Yes, Mr. Hines.
I have a question. Does this part of the sign, the slow down, does that glow in the dark when the lights shine on it? Is it more prominent at night
Yes, Mayor.
where it says slow down? Does.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, members of the council, Councilmember Devine, that is correct. It's made out of reflective material. So it's that same reflective material that's used on the traffic signs that you see on the roadside that's used on the styrene.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sure. And so in continuing, we are here today to provide staff's recommendation to move forward with the use of the styrene material, the stronger material, and the double-sided installation for the future slow street sign installations. In moving forward with the modifications, phase 1 would include replacement at 60 locations with the double-sided sign option, or a total of 120 signs, again using the styrene material. Phase 2 would include installation of up to 200 locations with the double-sided styrene signs, which would be a total of 400 signs as they're double posted. These phase 1 and phase 2 recommended modifications are within the current budget appropriation. So now we'll go to the options that are not within the current budget appropriation and our staff's recommended enhancements. So these are the K71 flexible traffic posts. And on the left, we see two images. On the upper left is a location in city of Glendale, where it was applied as part of the Glendale protected bike lane on Los Feliz. And that was used together with the white striping, so you'll see the white colored K71 flexible traffic post. On the lower left is an example in the city of Los Angeles Slow Streets program, where the yellow K71 flexible traffic posts are used in a double yellow or center placed location. So in staff's recommendation for the use of the K71 flexible traffic posts, there's two street widths that would fit into the use of these enhancements. The first is for streets that are 36 feet wide. That would include the installation of two K71 traffic posts, one in front and one behind the slow street signs. On streets that are 40 feet or wider, then there's more roadway space available. So in this option, the K71 markers can essentially be installed surrounding the slow street sign, one in front and back and on each side because of the additional roadway space. Installing either the K71s or the slow streets on streets that are less than 36 feet wide are not recommended, as considering this would require red curb installations and loss of parking. Other enhancements the other enhancement that was recommended by staff, again, that would require new budget appropriation, is the installation of a concrete median in the middle of the street along the double yellow to complement the slow street sign with the K71 marker installed in front and in back. This installation would be reserved for streets that are 38 feet wide. The concrete median would be approximately 2 feet wide. And on the screen, we see two graphics. On the left is a graphics to show what potentially this concrete median could look like. In this case, a different type of sign is installed in front of it. What staff is recommending here is to put the K71s in front and behind with the slow street sign on top in the middle. On the right side is a schematic showing potentially where this concrete median could be installed. The key takeaway from this graphic is that the concrete median is set back from the stop bar to allow for those turning maneuvers for the larger vehicles. The LADOT Slow Streets program was also looked into. In this case, we see on the left graphic an installation, one of the LADOT optional installations that includes a typical roadside type sign structure. And it's made out of a metal post, a thick metal post with metal type, standard type signs surrounded by the K71 markers. Some of the challenge areas or cons that staff identified with this sort of installation or implementation would be simply it requires space. So the clearance area would still provide that very narrow entry point and potentially conflict with those turning maneuvers for the garbage trucks, fire trucks, et cetera. Also, if a vehicle potentially hits this, an errant vehicle, truck, or what have you, it could potentially hit it hard enough where the signpost actually gets dislodged, and now there may potentially be this flying heavy projectile that can cause significant damage or even injury. Also, with the additional width that's shown on this assembly, on streets that are narrower than 40 feet, it would require red curb and loss of parking, as well as lastly, the cost of this sort of implementation is higher because of not only the signposts and so forth, but the removal and installation of striping and the red curb markings. So in closing, staff assessed the phase one installations and the lessons learned, and we developed recommended modifications, some of which are within the current budget appropriation, and some which are enhancements, which would require new budget appropriation. Within the current budget appropriation would be the styrene signs and implementing the double posting or back-to-back installations for both phase one and phase two. And within the enhancements that would require new budget appropriation would be the two options we saw with the K71 markers with the 2 and the 4 posts, as well as installation of the concrete median. Again, these would require additional budget appropriation for both phase one and phase two. And with that, that concludes the presentation, and we'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Ms. Devine?
I still have a concern on our, one of your photos or shows Lexington, for example, where you move the signs back away from the intersection. If you take Lexington, Geneva, Jackson, cars are parked on both sides of the street. Right now, if you put something in the middle, whether it's at the intersection or in further back on that street, cars are already having to move over, hopefully there's an empty spot where we can move over. We don't have room to get through 2 cars. And then if you put one of these in that location, have you looked at that? Or are those streets already taken out of the equation? They will not have these signs on them.
Yes, Councilmember Devine, it's staff's recommendation to implement these slow street signs on street, in the middle of the street application, on streets that are 36 feet wide or greater. So in those cases, parking that would be allowed would still maintain a minimum 10-foot travel lane for vehicles on each side of the slow street
Okay,
sign.
so you've taken the parked cars into consideration when you're figuring the amount of space you have for the sign?
Councilmember Devine, that is correct.
Okay, that's fine. And my other comment is about the concrete phase 2. I guess it would be, that seems to me like when we put the monument up in Montrose La Crescenta area and people were hitting that. I don't know how good of an idea, but that's in phase 2 and we don't have to decide that today, correct?
Councilmember Devine, that is correct.
Okay. And we have a budget right now for 520 of these signs that we can put up.
Correct. We have, within the current budget appropriation, enough for 520 of the double-posted styrene signs.
Okay. Well, I think lessons learned, you have learned some lessons here. And one thing that I want to say, I never thought about this, the fact that it could be delivery trucks, Amazon, FedEx, our garbage, our integrated waste, hitting these signs, and not just automobiles, but these bigger vehicles. So that was interesting to me. So, okay, thank you for the report.
Ms. Asaturian.
What other cities have this implemented? I know it's important for us. I'm trying to see if there's any data out there that shows these actually work.
Yes, Councilmember Asatrian, the 2 cities and county that we've looked at is Los Angeles, City of Los Angeles, as well as the County of Los Angeles. Their program is slightly different, but I think it was still a learning phase for those cities and counties as well. I know the county in the early stages during the pandemic tried the middle installations, didn't work for them. So the latest that I've seen is they do a side of the road installation near the gutter. And in terms of City of Los Angeles, as I've reached out to my colleagues in that city, essentially they've tried different things. In the picture that we saw, they've had some issues with those sorts of applications, and essentially it's a learning process right now from what we see with other cities as well.
Okay. And then do you guys have a plan for the poles that are currently installed on those smaller streets? Right around the neighborhood I live in, it's much narrower, and so you wouldn't be installing these new ones onto those streets, but the poles are still there. Most of them are like, someone's already hit them, but the pole is there. The sign is, was gone like within 2 days of the installation of the first one. Do you guys have a plan for the poles that are currently installed?
Councilmember Asatrian, just to clarify, these are the ones that are roadside mounted behind the curb, or the ones that are in the middle of the street?
The ones that were in the center that you guys had placed, so.
Just so I make sure I understand correctly, Councilmember Asatrian, are you referring to the ones that were mounted on the barricades that in some areas are still out on the street?
Yes.
So,
Okay, yes.
good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. To answer your questions, the ones that are on narrower streets, we're going to remove them. Yeah, we're going to remove them, and we're only going with the 36-foot wide or larger streets. If some of the posts are within that 36-foot, then we're going to install the double-posted signs on top of the tough posts. But if they're smaller than that, as we've seen, like good example is Ethel Street, it just doesn't make sense to put them there because they're going to keep getting hit.
Okay. Thank you. Sure. And then lastly, from time to time, before every Tuesday when we do have a council meeting, I post the agendas on my social media platforms, and a lot of times I'll also ask a question whether or not, folks support a project or not. I just wanted to give you guys feedback. I posted one about the street signs yesterday, and there were 285 responses, with 69% of the folks that responded saying yes, they supported, and then 31 saying no. So just for your own feedback.
Okay, a couple
Mr. Brotman.
questions, yeah. So, and I was going to also ask about those narrower streets. So like, how many other instances are there like Ethel? Are there a lot that we're going to just remove the program from?
Councilmember Brotman, there are quite a bit of streets. Essentially, local streets can be narrower than the 36 feet.
But how many are there that we've, where we installed the signs maybe back when we started this, when we had those A-frames, and then we replaced them with the ones that got hit? How many of those locations are we going to be pulling out? Just roughly, I just want to get a sense. Is it like 25% of our installations we're not going to be able to do anymore, or is it a very small, just a handful of places like Ethel?
Yes, although I don't have that specific number here, there are some streets that are less than the 36-foot wide from the initial list from the temporary program that I believe you're mentioning.
Councilmember Broadman, we did those mostly on requests, so special requests, and there are a handful of them that are less than 36. Ethel, I think, is 30-foot wide, so it's much narrower. So we did those on a case-by-case basis, so there are a handful of them. There are not that many of them that we've installed these newer signs, if they're pretty narrow.
So like 5, 10? You don't know? Okay.
I don't know, but they're not that many, less than 10, I would say.
Yeah, I should mention, on Ethel, there's one right at Ethel and Mountain. That one got hit like in a day. But there's one at Ethel and Geneva that I go by all the time because that's the way I bike here. That one's like stood the test of time. I don't know why, but that one's still in good shape. And that's narrow, so it's interesting.
And Councilmember Rodman, we've also had reports that some of these were deliberately, the signs were attacked. At least one of them where somebody stopped their car, jumped at it, started pulling them out.
Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is about where we're placing them, because one of the challenges we talked about this before is because it's on request. The people that tend to request signs are people, in North Glendale, some of the neighborhoods in North Glendale. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we haven't gotten nearly as many requests in kind of the areas that are more predominantly renter in South Glendale. So, a couple things there. One is I'm interested in what that split is. And also, a recommendation would be that we don't assign them all on request, that we have a certain percentage of the program where it's staff directed and it's based on the pedestrian plan. It's based on these segments that we know are dangerous. We've had a lot of accidents, and regardless of whether there's a request, we would do that. So that would be, it's kind of, there's a question there and there's a recommendation. But the question was about north versus south. If you have any idea of kind of how we ended up, what that mix was.
Yes, Councilman Brotman, thank you for clarifying. So a bit of history or rationale on how we developed the phase 1 and phase 2 is when we looked at the original implementation of the temporary slow streets program, the ones that were mounted on the barricade, there were approximately 300 sign locations. Of those 300, there was a vast majority that were in North Glendale, 250, and there were 50 in South Glendale, and simply because there were less requests in South Glendale. So when we developed the phase 1 and phase 2, we started with phase 1 with 100 locations, and we implemented all 50 of those that were from the temporary program that were in South Glendale. We implemented in the phase 1 permanent program. And then we selected in North Glendale another 50 based on the speeds and the volumes that we had history for to provide that equitability. As we move forward to the phase 2, that is one of the things that are going to be incorporated into the plan, is to that equitability component between North and South Glendale.
Okay, that's good. I think that's important, and that we also we align with the pedestrian plan, so we're using that as a guidepost for where we know we have problems, and we should, go ahead whether there's a request or not. And then, and just my last thing would be on these concrete barriers. Those I really think should not be based on requests, because those are pretty expensive. Those should really be the kinds of things that we're doing as part of the pedestrian plan, and I would almost say, let's kind of set that aside and maybe whatever. I don't know if using the money for that is going to take away money for implementation of the pedestrian plan, but I'd much rather have us, kind of implement the pedestrian plan and where we're going to do those permanent kinds of interventions, that we do them kind of on that basis, not on the basis of a request, in an area that, somebody feels we need it, but it's not really where we've determined our biggest problems are. So those are my thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions. So with regard to the polystyrene versus the corrugated plastic, is there why do we think that this, which is the polystyrene, is going to be any more, let's say, durable to a vehicle impact than a corrugated plastic? Are we just assuming that? Clearly, it's more durable. No doubt about that. But we're talking about, a vehicle strike that may even knock down something that was made out of steel. So what's our thought behind that?
So Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, what it is, it's a combined approach. It's not only the polystyrene material, but also the placement, I think, is very important. So not only are we going to have a more durable product that we've seen used on other types of signs that we showed on the image, but also the placement of it is going to put it beyond that harm's way. With the initial phase 1, it was right there at the turning maneuver. So we think that combination is going to help.
All right. And then on streets 40 feet wide or greater, we're going to have this sign plus the 4 K71 plastic posts. Is that the recommendation, or are we not doing those 4 posts at this point? Because I see it's one of the recommended in
Yes, Mayor
phase
Pro
1
Tem.
permanent program modifications.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Najarian, that's included in the enhancements that would require further or new budget appropriation. So the thought there would be to, depending on council's direction today, if staff receives direction to look further into these enhancements, staff will then reach out to a contractor and get more precise numbers and come back to council for the new budget appropriation.
Wouldn't it be wise to place a couple of pilot projects, pilot locations, to see how these turn up before we, even if council were to say, yeah, we like the 4 posts and we'll give you the extra money, if it turns out that those posts are just as vulnerable as the original phase 1, we would still have the opportunity to pivot and maybe up our game in terms of the design, rather than being stuck with how many, 500, well, it's 100 plus 200, 300 of these, which I would call perhaps obsolete. I mean, why don't we test it out in a few areas and see how they work? If they hold up, I would be very supportive of giving you the extra budget authority. But without, I mean, it's sort of like we're changing parts on a car, right? They say, just don't swap parts out unless you know what the issue is. So it seems that that's what we're doing here, is that we're we're upping the game. Clearly, they are more durable, but they might not be durable enough for the sort of impacts that we have, and even the extra visibility may not prevent those impacts. But what do you think about that?
Mayor Pro Tem
Is that something for
Najarian,
the director to weigh in on, or our former city engineer? I mean, try it out in a few spaces.
Definitely, Mayor.
We'll say, hey, we got a winner, let's,
Mayor Pro Tem, that's a really good idea, and we can start with a pilot program and see what the impacts would be.
And, yeah, I just want to say that, I'm sorry, but just from Mr. Casanova's remarks, you know, we're on a learning curve right now. Seems like everybody that's installing these is learning what works, what doesn't work, and so that's where we are as well. So I think that's a really good idea to have a pilot project like that and see what happens.
And, yeah, I mean, I support that too. I think we should not just do, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 locations, though. I think we should try some different locations, different street sizes, try some of the 4s, some of the 2s, enough that we can really assess. And then not take forever to come back and decide whether we're going to go forward. Like, do it for a few months, because, you know, these things just naturally take a long time.
we'll know. I mean, I hope that we would see it as, well, you're on the you're on the ground probably more than, not on the ground, but you're, you know what I mean.
Nearer to the ground.
Nearer to the ground. And if things are working, they're working. If things are wiped out,
Yeah.
we should maybe think, was it a placement issue? Was it, you know, what can we do for Ms. Asatrine?
Could we actually install the first set in locations that have high traffic, that you know of, that you potentially have also more collision and more speeding issues? Because if you can, if we test that, then the rest of the streets would be easier to know if it works or not.
So I guess what I'm hearing is council's in support of having test locations in several areas. Mr. Brotman's point was many areas. Ms. Asaturian's point is perhaps the most vulnerable or the most highly speed violative regions. And then come back to us and let us know how it goes. And if it seems to be working, council can take that into account and then decide to increase the budget and go citywide on the program.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council, absolutely, that's a great idea, and we will look at high traffic. We have no shortages of those, so we will have some candidate locations that we could test these out and their durability, and we'll come back to you within a few months with our recommendations.
Right.
Oh,
I have
okay.
one more.
Ms. Asaturian.
Is there going to be a price point difference when you're purchasing these? Because you have to get a smaller amount.
There
And
will
then-
be, but we do have some ongoing capital improvement programs that we can use their budget to test these out.
Okay, great.
So the question was the volume of purchase, would that have an impact on the per unit price?
Yes, it would. The more, obviously, the higher the volume, the cheaper the price.
Just the last thing from me is just, I agree that it makes sense to pilot. The other side of me, though, is I see all this debris, right? All these, like, those tough posts, you call them, that are just like half damaged and there's nothing on them. And I also hear from people, you probably do too, people kind of saying, well, what happened to the slow streets? Where's my slow street sign? I know there's some people up in Spar Heights that are kind of regularly ping me about, why didn't we get it? And I've sent you emails. So that's why I hope we could come back fairly quickly, like test it out,
Right.
a couple months. Let's not delay it, because it does look, it's an eyesore what we have now. And, there are a lot of people that kind of do want it. And we should be able to, try to get that done quickly.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council, definitely Mr. Amrani and his staff will go to work since we've gone direction, but we want to be able to give it sufficient time so that it has an effect on on the traffic so that we can determine and evaluate the durability and the feasibility of installation of these signs. So it may be longer than a couple of months.
Oh, so what are you thinking?
I'm thinking we'll come back early next year, so 3 or 4 months from now.
So the message is that we appreciate the problem, we hear from the residents, but we want to bring them the most effective speed reduction signage and implementation, so that it's not gone, in the next week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wish, okay, so, in terms of our motion, we have a motion at 2A. Mr. City Attorney, can we vote on that? Would that be consistent with,
This motion, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, appears to be authorizing the use of the styrene material throughout all new installations. It sounds like you want to institute a pilot program, so I
how
would
would we craft
modify that to authorize staff to use styrene sign material on a pilot basis. I'm not sure if you wanted to use high impact areas or I meant there was some disagreement there.
well, I'd like to put in a few of those 4-post things also on the wider
Right, right.
streets to see if those are effective.
Like a
The
mix
case
of
study
implementations
Right.
and locations, maybe.
Yeah,
And delegating to staff sort of the discretion to
right.
how to do so.
Right, and to return to council with the results no later than, should we put a deadline on it, or do you want some
What?
flexibility?
Mayor Pro Tem can set a deadline of February, so that gives us
later
3
than
months, yeah.
February
January 31st,
I
how's
have a-
that? Because
I have a-
February could be in February, end of February.
I have a feeling we'll know before then.
Yeah.
We'll know before then.
Okay, so that's the motion as stated by the city attorney.
I'll move at the item.
Moved,
I'll second.
seconded, roll call, please. Oh, do we have any callers?
We do not have any callers.
Okay, a roll call, please.
Council members Asatrian,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Kasakian.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the special meeting is adjourned. I'll let the tech crew set up their next meeting. Okay, and I call to order the regular city council meeting for the city of Glendale, October 11th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Council members Asatrian,
Here.
Brotman,
Here.
Divine,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Kasakian.
Will you please read the closed session items?
Yes. Closed session, item A, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, Glen Oaks Canyon Homeowners Association versus City of Glendale. LASC case number 22ST-CP0011. B, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, Wawanesa General Insurance claim number 22-0108. C, public employment attorneys. D, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9, one potential case.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia, do you anticipate reporting out on any of these items?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we anticipate reporting on items 1B and 1D.
Very good. We will recess to closed session.